Hey there, Drowsy Historian here. Tonight you're not in a palace or a senate hall or anywhere Rome would bother to remember. You're standing on the empire's edge, where dust clings to your skin, stones wait to be lifted, and the straight roads of Rome carve their will across the land. You're not a general or a surveyor, just an ordinary road builder, drifting through another demanding day beneath the Roman sun. Before we start, do me one small favour. Tell me where you're listening from and what time it is there. If you'd prefer these stories without ads, you can join the Patreon. It's linked in the description. And if you want the ultimate immersive experience, consider using a pair of wireless earbuds. They're comfortable, discreet, and designed so you can wear them even while sleeping. I've linked my favourite pair, plus other sleep tools, in the description. Now, lie back, get comfortable. Let's begin. You wake before the sun, feeling that familiar Roman chill that only exists to remind you that warmth is still hours away. The camp stirs around you with the slow inevitability of obligation as the day's orders arrive like another stone to carry. You push aside the thin blanket, feeling its rough weave drag across your fingers. It tries to cling to you as if it knows what the day holds and would rather you stayed beneath it. The ground beneath you has hardened through the night, shaping itself into every angle your body wished it hadn't felt. When you sit up, your spine protests with a slow, familiar ache, the kind that doesn't shout but sighs, the kind that has spent too many mornings like this. Around you, the camp shifts in small, sleepy adjustments. No one speaks yet. Breath clouds the air in pale ghosts that drift upward and vanish before they learn to linger. You listen to the soft rustle of bodies waking, the shuffle of men who know exactly how long they have before the day claims them. Time moves quietly here, but it does not stop. Not for you, not for anyone hauling stone under Rome's watchful disinterest. Your hands search for your sandals before your mind does. Fingers brushing leather, stiffened by yesterday's dust. You slide them on, tug the straps into place, and feel the faint bite of grit trapped underneath. It will stay there until it decides to leave on its own terms. Much like everything else, the fire from last night has collapsed into a mound of grey memory. A few embers pulse inside it, red and tired, as if they're considering the work that would be required to become flames again, and deciding against it. Someone passes by and nudges the pile with a stick, half out of habit, half out of hope. Nothing catches. The ember glows once, then shrinks back in defeat. A thin line of light begins to gather at the horizon. Not sunrise, but the suggestion of one. It's faint, delicate, almost apologetic. The sun has never hurried for you, and today is no different. You rub your arms through your tunic, wishing the cloth were thicker, but the empire has always been thrifty when dressing its labourers. Over the years, you've learned that your body will warm itself eventually, usually once the sun grows hot enough to make you regret wishing for it. Someone clears their throat nearby, another adjusts their belt, another sighs into the morning like they're trying to exhale the whole day before it begins. You stand because standing feels like the only reasonable thing left to do. The stiffness in your legs loosens with an unwillingness that borders on insult. Your breath mixes with the others, joining a low cloud drifting above camp. For a moment you imagine it settling back down on all of you, covering everyone in a thin sheet of shared fatigue, a communal fog of inevitability. Perhaps that's what dawn is, Rome's way of baptizing its workers before another day of progress. Then comes the sound you've been waiting for. Though waiting is far too deliberate a word. It is simply the sound that always arrives. The measured footsteps of the overseer, carrying with them the day's instructions. They're not loud, not urgent, not anything really, just present. Like a stone placed in your hand, heavy not because of its weight, but because you already know where it must be carried. He appears at the centre of camp, expression as unreadable as wet clay. The cold morning seems to shy away from him, not out of respect, but because it prefers not to be associated with responsibility. A wax tablet hangs from his side, marked with lines and notes that you suspect remain largely the same from day to day. Rome loves its lists. Rome loves its order. Rome loves the illusion that work is organised, even when everything beneath it is simply labour wearing a uniform. He doesn't call out. He doesn't need to. Everyone drifts toward him the way dust lifts in a breeze, slow, reluctant, inevitable. You join the cluster, standing shoulder to shoulder with men who look exactly how you feel. Not tired, not exactly, but worn thin in a way that feels permanent. The overseer lifts the tablet, squinting at it as though the words might decide to rearrange themselves while he watches. He reads the assignments in a voice that stays level, each instruction delivered with a calm that borders on boredom. You don't catch every detail, but you don't need to. You know the rhythm by heart, digging, hauling, levelling, measuring. The choreography of a road that insists on cutting straight lines through landscapes that never asked for them. Your name is mentioned briefly, folded into a sentence that pairs you with the morning's tasks. Something about stones that must be cleared, a line that must be followed, a section that must be shaped before noon has the chance to accuse you of idling. You nod, though no one is really watching for your reaction. The overseer continues reading, turning pages of labour that all sound the same regardless of the day. When he finishes, he closes the tablet with the soft snap of wax meeting wood. That sound travels through the camp like a bell, not ringing, but marking the moment all the same. People disperse, heading toward tools they left yesterday, which look exactly as they did the day before. You hesitate for a heartbeat, letting the morning settle around you before you move. Your hands reach for the shovel, leaning against a tent pole. Its handle bears the imprint of palms that may or may not be yours. At this point, every tool feels communal, as if the labour carved its own identity into the wood. The weight of it is familiar, predictable, almost comforting in its indifference. As you sling it over your shoulder, the faintest tremor of warmth touches the air, not from the sun, but from the anticipation of motion. You take a breath, slow and steady, the kind meant to prepare rather than strengthen. The ground crunches beneath your sandals as you begin walking toward the worksite, leaving the camp behind you in soft, scattered shapes. The chill follows for a moment, then releases you with something like reluctance. Ahead, the land stretches outward in muted colours, waiting for the geometry Rome insists upon. The faint glow at the horizon brightens, outlining the silhouettes of surveyors already moving into position. You watch them mark the earth with measured precision, long rods planted into soil that isn't quite awake yet. Their shadows extend across the ground, thin and unwavering, pointing forward with an authority that requires no voice. You walk toward those shadows, adjusting the grip on your shovel as the morning air begins to stir. The day hasn't fully started, not in the meaningful sense, but its direction is already chosen. The straight line has been drawn, at least in intention, and you know your steps will fall along it soon enough. You move closer, feeling the ground shift slightly underfoot, and the quiet murmur of measuring sticks tapping against one another drifts into the air. The rhythm is light, methodical, almost gentle in its insistence, and as you approach, wiping the last chill from your fingers, you come to understand the unspoken truth of the morning. The line is waiting for you, and the land has not yet decided whether it will cooperate. You take another step toward the surveyors, the shadows lengthening at your feet, guiding you toward whatever shape the day demands. You move toward the surveyors, letting your steps fall into the quiet patterns carved by years of doing the same thing in different stretches of land. The morning light has sharpened slightly, thin rays cutting across the fields like Rome's own measuring rods. They pierce the cool air without warming it, illuminating the dew that clings stubbornly to every blade of grass. The moisture glitters as though trying to imitate something precious, though it settles back into plainness the moment your shadow touches it. The surveyors stand ahead with their tools, groma, rods, cords, each one so simple it seems almost insulting that they hold such authority over landscapes. You arrive just as one of them adjusts the cross-shaped groma, aligning its plumb lines until they hang in perfect stillness. The wind, cooperative only when it chooses to be unhelpful, quiets long enough for him to narrow his eyes and check the alignment again. He nods once, satisfied not with the land, but with the precision forced upon it. You watch the rods get placed one after another, each hammered into soil that probably held different ideas about its own future. The surveyor gestures, a small flick of the hand that sends you forward along the imagined path. The gesture is not rude, not commanding, simply necessary, as if the morning itself requires your movement to begin in earnest. The ground slopes gently beneath your feet, the unevenness making your ankles ache in ways you no longer bother resenting. You've learned that resentment is heavy, and Rome already gives you enough weight to carry. It's easier to let the discomfort settle into your bones, like an unwelcome tenant who pays no rent but stays quiet enough to avoid eviction. You trace the invisible line through the field, guided by the distant rod's silent insistence. The land rolls lazily, a slow rise here, a reluctant dip there. The line, however, accepts none of these gestures. It stretches across the terrain with the confidence of a command written before the landscape existed. Rome does not bend its roads for hills or streams or the sentimental curves of a meadow. Rome chooses straightness, as though curves are a sign of weakness, a flaw to be pressed out. Your feet sink slightly into a patch of soft earth, and you glance down at the damp soil darkening your sandals. It's the kind of mud that would happily swallow a man whole if it had a little more ambition. But ambition is reserved for people and empires, not for earth that simply exists until someone decides to reshape it. A surveyor's assistant calls out measurements behind you, numbers delivered with the flat precision of someone who has long ago stopped caring about their meaning. They sound like fragments of a ritual, recited without belief. But they still matter, because the empire believes in straight lines the way some people believe in fate. To Rome, a road is not just a path, it is a statement. It says, "We were here, we passed through, and the land listened." You adjust your direction slightly, aligning yourself with the next rod. The air carries the faint smell of damp soil, mixed with crushed grass, a scent that clings to your memory as stubbornly as the dust that clings to your lungs. The ground stretches far ahead, and you follow it with the steady pace of someone who understands that speed is irrelevant. The line will be there, whether you arrive quickly or not. A small stream cuts across your intended path, a narrow ribbon of water murmuring quietly to itself. It seems to slide through the morning with a purpose far more graceful than yours. Its gentle babbling competes only with the sound of your breath and the distant tapping of surveyor rods. The stream curves naturally, unconcerned with geometry. Rome, however, is not fond of curves. You step up to its edge and stare at the way it skirts around stones and dips into the earth with the ease of something that has mastered the art of moving without being told how. You can almost hear the land making an argument in favour of letting the water keep its shape, but the line you carry in your mind slices across the stream without hesitation, demanding obedience. Behind you, the surveyors wait for your signal, their attention fixed on the rods that define their world. You raise your arm, just a small motion, and see them nod. That is enough. The stream's path has been denied its freedom. It will be redirected, forced into compliance, later by trenches and channels carved with stubborn tools. The empire does not negotiate with water. You continue forward, the soft sucking sound of mud, briefly holding your sandal before releasing it again with a reluctant sigh. The field widens into a patch of land flattened by years of grazing. You can almost picture the animals who once moved here, slow creatures with no awareness of the geometry, soon to replace their wandering paths. They left gentle arcs in the land, traces of peaceful movement. The straight line you follow will erase those arcs before the day grows old. As you walk, the sun begins its slow climb, spreading warmth that feels less like comfort and more like an approaching obligation. The chill slips away from your shoulders, replaced by a weight that heat carries with surprising ease. Your tunic sticks to your back, sweat forms before your body even decides if it's necessary. The day has barely begun, and already the air feels like it's reminding you that straight lines are built by people whose comfort is negotiable. You stop at a rise where the land lifts a little higher, forcing you to tilt your chin upward. The line continues straight through it, unbothered by the effort required. You stand there a moment, breathing in the still cool air while the sun warms your cheek. The rise is not steep, not dramatic, just inconvenient. Rome considers inconvenience a personal affront. A surveyor joins you, his sandals scraping the dirt in a pattern you've grown used to. He doesn't speak, just looks ahead, judging the alignment with an expression that suggests mild disappointment in the hill's existence. He adjusts the angle of the rod in his hand, squints at the horizon, then nods to himself. The nod seems less like approval and more like acceptance. The hill will be cut, trimmed, reshaped until it agrees. You take the next step forward, letting your weight settle into the earth. Each footfall confirms the unavoidable truth that the landscape has no say in its future. It only has you, and the tools, and the line, and the empire that believes straightness is a virtue worth enforcing. Your legs move steadily, as if they've memorized the length of every stride required to follow a line that exists more in intention than reality. The rod ahead gleams faintly in the sun, its metal tip still damp with morning dew. It stands taller than you, watching over the land with the quiet arrogance of something that knows its placement determines the shape of a road that will outlive everyone who touched it. You reach it, place your hand against its wooden shaft, and feel the texture, smooth from handling, but still carrying the faint resistances of the tree it once was. The rod feels strangely alive, holding its place with a kind of rigid pride, its roots long removed, but its purpose newly planted. Another surveyor further down the field raises his hand, signalling the next adjustment. You follow the gesture, narrowing your eyes to find the glint of the next rod, far in the distance. It is barely visible, a thin vertical line against the sky, like a punctuation mark in a sentence too long to care about its own grammar. You inhale slowly, letting the air settle into your lungs. Dust mingles with the breath, bringing with it the scent of the land you're meant to correct. You exhale just as slowly, as if pacing your breath might somehow pace the day. You move on again, crossing another stretch of uneven ground. A stone shifts beneath your sandal, rolling away with a soft thud. You glance back at it, imagining the pile it will eventually join. Stones removed from the land not because they did anything wrong, but because they simply stood where Rome wished to pass. Ahead, another field unfolds. The grass taller here, swaying in a reluctant breeze. The surveyors stand waiting, their shadows long, their expressions unreadable. They watch you approach, as though the land itself has been holding its breath for you. You stop beside them, and in the quiet pause that settles between your steps and their measurements, you feel the straight line tightening across the morning, stretching from where you began to wherever the empire has decided it will end. And as you stand there, the rods pointing forward like the bones of a path not yet born, you adjust your grip on the shovel at your side, knowing the line is ready to become something more solid, more permanent, more demanding. You step toward the next marker, the land shifting gently beneath your feet as though trying to negotiate one final time, and failing. You step toward the next marker, and the ground takes your weight without comment. The morning has already arranged itself into motion, rods fixed, line visible, and you, with your shovel and straps, set to make the path real. The surveyors fall back into their watchful orbit, leaving you and the others to the work that needs no speeches, only measured, tired bodies and the stubborn persistence of muscle. A cart waits nearby, its wooden frame smelling faintly of sap and old rope. The oxen that will pull it stand with slow eyes, patient as stones, chewing their cud with the unaffected dignity of creatures who have not been assigned meaning by empire. You do not envy them. Gratitude is a currency not often circulated where you work. Still, you respect the animal's indifference. It is clean and simple compared with the complicated expectations people pile on one another here. The pile of stones glitters in the early sun like a small, indifferent offering. They are not all the same. Some are jagged, some are rounded by old weather, Some bear the scars of other hands, but to the road, they are interchangeable. Each one is another piece of future permanence, another weight that will outlast the breath that set it down. You step forward and feel the stone's coolness under your fingers. Even these small comforts, cool stone, brief weightlessness in lifting, are rationed. You lift the first one onto a yoke balanced across your shoulders. The yoke presses into your collarbone and breathes a reminder along your spine. For a moment, you are a hinge between weight and movement, a living lever transferring earth into order. The stone settles, heavy and unrepentant, and something in you counts the seconds before the next breath. The mouth forms a silent vow not to complain. Complaints are noisy and useless. Silence is a contract everyone here honors. You and the others move as a unit, without fanfare, without song. That coordination has been written into your bones. It is a quiet language of knowing when to step and when to steady. There is a small grace in the motion, a human choreography learned out of necessity. Each of you carries a different portion of the road's future, and together you distribute the burden until no single body bears it alone. The path you follow crosses a field pocked with old roots and small stubborn stones that refuse to be polite. You step around or over them, sometimes pausing to lever out an especially obstinate rock. Your hands understand the angle of leverage the way a sailor understands rope. You pry, twist and lift, feeling the earth around the stone loosen in reluctant surrender. The noise that comes from this, wood against rock, breath against air, is low and functional. It does not ask for sympathy. Sympathy would be dangerous. It might encourage you to notice the absurdity of the task. When the cart arrives, you help to load it, arranging stones with a mind toward balance rather than beauty. The cart's boards creak as each weight finds its place. There is an economy to the way you stack them, heavier pieces toward the center, smaller ones filling the gaps. No one bothers to say it aloud, but you all know that a poorly loaded cart is a slow cart, and a slow cart is an invitation to extra hours. The oxen strain once the yoke is attached, and then they walk, pulling the future behind them in a low, uninterrupted rhythm. You follow at their side, feeling the vibrations travel up through the cart and into the soles of your feet. The road is not yet a road. It is a promise in transit. Dust lifts underfoot, settling in the hollows of your skin and making a map across your arms. It has a way of staying, like an opinion you can't shake. At the unloading point, the real work begins. Stones are lifted, slid, arranged and adjusted. You fit each one into place with the exactness of habit, feeling for how it will sit next to its neighbours. Sometimes a stone refuses to lie flat. You coax it with the butt of your shovel, the flat of your hand, a brief but persistent negotiation until the piece submits. The satisfaction of a well-fitted stone is discreet but real. It is a small victory in a world of deferred approvals. There is no song, but there is a sound. The collective breathing of people at work, the faint metallic ring as tools meet stone, the soft thump as a larger rock finds its home. These sounds knit together into a slow, deliberate chorus that could be mistaken for silence if you were not listening closely. You learn to love that chorus because it is honest. It tells you precisely what is happening without explaining why. Your shoulders adjust repeatedly under the strain. The skin at the edges of the yoke grows calloused in patterns that the eye can read like a ledger, entries of labour stamped into flesh. Each mark is a day accounted for, a task tallied without ink. Your hands too have a record, small scars where the skin split open and healed, a darkened crescent where dirt settled into a fold, the muscle memory of how to balance a rock on a narrow lip of soil. Time is measured in these bodily footnotes. Silence governs your mouth but not your mind. Thoughts drift like loose stones at the edge of consciousness. Small items of memory that would normally jostle for attention, but here are kept at bay by the work's steady forward pull. You think of little things, the way bread smelled at the camp this morning, the dull warmth of a neighbour's back as he bent to lift, the way the sun touches the top of a distant hedge. These are not grand reflections, they are small threads you tuck away for nights, when sleep will be willing to accept them. Occasionally, a dry laugh slips through among you, sudden and brief as a dropped pebble. It is a thing that startles everyone because it sounds like surprise, not from happiness, but from the realization that absurdity is permitted to exist and you are still required to continue. The laugh is shared and then swallowed, doing humour quickly, especially humour that acknowledges the ridiculousness of hauling stones into permanence for an empire that may forget your name, is an art form practiced in whispers. At times the work demands a slow engineering of patience. A particularly stubborn boulder requires you to dig around it, to undermine its old loyalties to the earth. Digging is a different kind of motion, deeper, quieter, more intimate. You feel the soil give way beneath your hands. You measure the depth in inches and the time in swallowed breaths. Removing a stone this way is like unseating a memory, delicate and final. When the foundation is ready, stones are set with ritual precision. Your hammer taps, the sound steady as a heartbeat. Each strike drives a piece further into resolution. Each miss corrects a minor arrogance in the stone's angle. You work in near silence because the conversation here is practical. Asking for a tool, indicating a need without an extra syllable. Words waste energy. The empire supplies the plan and you supply the execution. As the day moves on, your body learns to ration itself. You pace the exertions, taking in deep, controlled breaths. You become connoisseurs of small rests, a second to lift your neck, a pause to wipe the sweat from a brow, the precise moment to hand a stone to the man beside you so that his motion can carry what yours cannot. These interstitial pauses are where fatigue gathers like a shadow, waiting for a full stop it knows will not arrive. When the midday heat reclaims the sky, you feel it press like a hand against your back, an insistence that the world continues even when you would prefer a gentler cadence. Sweat beads at your temples and runs down into the collar of your tunic, tracing paths through dust and grime as if charting a map of the day. Despite the discomfort, you find the rhythm comforting, predictable, regulated, a machine running without fanfare. Lunch is quick and functional. Bread, a sliver of cheese, water that tastes faintly of iron, sustenance measured in efficiency rather than pleasure. You eat in a small circle with others, sharing the silence like a meal. There is little conversation. What could be said is already being said by the motion of hands and the angle of shoulders. The food does not make you sing. It steadies you. After the brief respite, you return to the line with the same array of tools and the same muted determination. The line itself does not cajole you. It simply waits, indifferent, holding the empire's geometry like an open wound begging for closure. You resume the slow meditation of shifting weight and placement, muscle and mind aligning with the unspoken orders that have outlived kings. At some point the sun drifts west and the shadows grow longer, and you notice anew the calluses forming like quiet ledgers. You may not know the name of the traveller who will walk this section decades hence, but you can almost imagine the way their foot will meet the stone. Light, untroubled, unaware of the labour that set the stage. The thought lands in your chest like a small resigned amusement. You place one last stone into its intended slot before the overseer's soft whistle marks the day's slow end. Hands tired but exact, you step back and let the small satisfaction of a completed task settle in the ribs. It is not triumph, it is a quiet acknowledgement that the day has been accounted for, that the road now owes one less debt. The silence remains, and it is not emptiness. Rather, it is full of the work just done, a dense quiet you could hold in your palm. You shoulder the tools and walk back toward the camp, your gait measured by the path you helped shape. Around you, others move the same way, each carrying the residue of the day like a second skin. Night will come with its familiar coolness, and the world will fold itself into rest for a handful of hours before the line calls you again. As you pass the last marker, the rods stand like watchful teeth along the horizon. Your shadow stretches across the stones you set, thin and long, a soft seal upon the work. You breathe in the evening air. It tastes like dust and modest pride. The road is taking form beneath your hands, slow and mercilessly persistent, and you feel the small dry humour that visits rarely, that you are making something meant to last longer than any memory of you will. You let it pass without comment and walk on, carrying stones in your mind as much as on your shoulders. The tools weigh differently in your hands as you walk toward the marked ground, the faint traces of daylight settling into a soft haze across the landscape. The stones behind you sit in quiet alignment, each one a small declaration of progress. Ahead, the line darkens into a shallow cut, the overseer's want deepened before the sun gains its full authority. It pulls you forward with its quiet insistence, a thin wound in the earth asking to be widened. When you reach the edge, you pause only long enough to feel the shift in the air. The soil here carries a different scent, richer, cooler, the kind that rises from deeper layers of earth untouched by daylight. You lower yourself into the trench, one foot then the other, letting gravity take the final say. Your boots sink slightly into the soft dirt at the bottom, and your hands brush the walls for balance. The soil gives way under your fingers, cold and damp like breath from a sleeping animal. The trench stretches forward with no visible end. Its length dissolves into a thin shadow, a narrow road waiting to be hollowed out. It feels less like a task and more like an invitation you can't decline. Stopping would require a reason, a conversation, an explanation, the kind of attention no worker seeks. Moving forward, however, requires nothing except the next breath and the strength to guide it. You sink the edge of your shovel into the earth. The soil breaks with a soft thud, folding over itself as you lift it out. The weight is familiar, heavy enough to remind you of your own body, light enough to betray how much remains. You toss the first mound over the trench wall. It lands with a muted slap, spreading across the grass like a discarded thought. No one looks up to acknowledge it. Beside you, others dig in their own measured cadences. No voice leads them. The rhythm comes from the movement itself, metal biting into soil, dirt rising and falling, breaths pulled through dust-thickened air. It is a kind of unsung hymn, a slow prayer to repetition. You join it without thinking. There's no need for thinking here. Thinking is a luxury reserved for people whose labour ends when the sun does. The trench deepens quickly, or perhaps the world rises around you. It's difficult to tell. Shovel after shovel, the earth shifts shape, shedding what it once was to make way for what Rome insists it should be. Small roots cling stubbornly to the ground, thin white threads that resist as though they remember older seasons. You tear them aside with the dull resolve of someone who has stopped expecting things to stay in their place. Sweat gathers at your temples, even though the morning still holds the coolness of dawn. It slips down your cheek and into the collar of your tunic, tracing a damp line across your back. You pause only long enough to swipe your forearm across your brow. The dirt smears, but the motion brings a moment of clarity, a reminder that you are shaped by the day as much as the trenches. When you lift the next mound of soil, something small shifts beneath the surface, a fragment of pottery, the corner of a buried story. You brush the dirt aside with your thumb. The shard is nothing special. The curve of a rim, the faint ghost of a design, worn down by time and silence. You set it on a ledge of the trench wall. It doesn't belong to the road, but destroying it feels unnecessary. The Empire may not care about what lies beneath its path, but you do, if only for the length of one heartbeat. You keep digging. The trench grows deeper, until the wind becomes something distant and the sun appears only as a pale light filtering down from the rim above. The world narrows into the width of the cut and the weight of the soil in your shovel. Voices fade, footsteps soften. You work inside a corridor of earth, a temporary home built from labour and quiet necessity. Your shoulders ache in steady pulses, small waves of discomfort that travel through muscle and bone. The ache becomes its own companion, a reliable one at least. Pain seldom lies. You adjust your grip on the shovel, angling the blade so it cuts more cleanly. The soil here is tamped tighter, old layers that remember centuries of pressure. The shovel makes a dull scraping sound as it shears through them. A crow calls in the distance, its voice a raspy reminder that the sky still exists, somewhere above the trench walls. You do not look up. The bird has the freedom of wings. You have the freedom of forward motion. Each being uses the one given to them. A clod of earth collapses near your foot, crumbling into a soft rain of dust. You step back instinctively, adjusting your balance. The trench has moods, and it reveals them without warning. You brace the wall with your shovel's handle, pushing loose soil aside, creating a ledge that will hold, at least long enough for today's work. Permanence belongs to the road, not to the men who carve it. You trade shovels with someone whose blade has dulled. The exchange takes no words. His hand meets yours briefly, a shared understanding passing between two people shaped by the same weight. Then he returns to his stretch of earth. You return to yours. The bottom of the trench widens little by little, making space for the layers that will come later. The gravel, the crushed stone, the packed earth that Rome believes will hold forever. You find the certainty admirable. In a distant way, empires dream in centuries. Workers dream in hours of rest. The sun climbs higher, and shadows shift across the walls. Light stripes the earth in bands, revealing textures untouched until this moment. Tiny fossils, river-worn pebbles, veins of clay that streak the soil like old tears. You run your fingers along one of the clay lines. It is cool, slick, unwilling to let go of its shape. You break it apart anyway. The road does not need sentiment. A slight breeze drops into the trench, bringing with it the smell of distant pine and the faint metallic tang of tools being sharpened. The air stirs the fine dust around your ankles, creating miniature storms that rise and fall without purpose. You watch them briefly. For a moment, they seem alive. The overseer's shadow crosses the edge above you, a thin, elongated figure stretching across the trench like a sundial's pointer. He doesn't speak, merely observes the depth and width with a detached eye, the way someone might inspect a ledger. His approval appears as a simple nod. His absence removes even that. He moves on. Your work remains. Eventually, your shovel hits a stone buried deep in the earth. The blade strikes it with a jarring vibration, sending a tremor through your arm. You crouch, brushing away the soil. The stone is large, too large to lift alone. You wedge your shovel underneath, coaxing it upward. It resists, as though the land wants to keep at least one piece of itself intact. You brace your foot, angle your weight, and press again. The stone shifts with a reluctant groan. Another worker joins you, then a third. Together the three of you pry the stone free in a slow, silent negotiation between bodies and earth. When it finally rolls loose, it lands with a heavy thud that shakes the trench walls. Dust billows around you. No one celebrates the moment, but no one laments it either. It is simply one more obstacle removed, another breath accounted for. The trench continues ahead, long enough that the sun seems unable to reach its far end. It feels like time stretched into a corridor, the kind you walk down without ever expecting a door. You move into it anyway, shovel in hand, patient, because the earth demands patience more than strength. As the day matures, your motions settle into a steady endurance. Dig, lift, toss, dig, lift, toss. The sequence becomes almost meditative. Your mind drifts in the quiet, not away from the task, but through it, as though floating down a slow river carved by your own body. At some point, you stop to stretch your back. The air at the trench's bottom holds the day's warmth, but not its brightness. You breathe it in and feel the work linger in your chest, a shapeless heaviness that belongs neither to fatigue nor to purpose, just to the hours you've given. You step forward again, shovel raised, soil waiting. The trench expands. The line breathes deeper. Rome's geometry becomes a living thing beneath your hands. And as another shovel of earth rises into the daylight above, you feel the trench swallowing distance, swallowing time, becoming an unbroken continuation of your own motion. One long, patient descent carved inch by inch into a world that never asked for straightness. When the trench reaches the depth the overseer has wordlessly accepted, the work shifts. There is no pause, no signal, only a subtle rearrangement of tools and bodies. You climb out of the cut, palms coated in the fine grit of hours, and feel the air change around you. Wider, warmer, almost indifferent. The trench lies behind like a hollowed vein, waiting to be filled with things that are not soil anymore. Nearby, a mound of gravel glints under the returning sun, sharp edges catching the light in small reluctant flashes. You walk toward it with the hollow calm that the day has carved into you. The stones crunch underfoot, shifting with a brittle sound that feels both confrontational and resigned. You pick up the first basket, lift it into place against your hip, and feel the familiar tug of weight pulling your spine slightly sideways. It is a reminder that balance is something you negotiate, not something you possess. A procession begins, quiet, steady, almost ceremonial in its lack of ceremony. Gravel is carried to the trench in baskets that rub the skin raw where they meet muscle. Each trip feels the same as the last, and that sameness becomes a strange comfort. Predictability is the closest thing you have to rest. You pour the gravel into the trench, watching it scatter into the hollow like dry rain. The small stones tumble and settle, forming a new surface that softens under pressure. You smooth it with a rake, guiding the pieces into a more obedient spread. The gravel whispers against itself with the soft hiss of something learning to compress. Others join you, their footsteps blending into a muted rhythm. No words are needed. The work has its own logic, slow and deliberate. You tamp the layer down with a flat wooden tool, pressing your weight onto it until the gravel becomes something closer to intention than chaos. The tamping board takes each impact with a dull thud, sending small shocks up through your arms. After a while, the shock dulls, becomes familiar, becomes part of the day's vocabulary. Then comes sand, coarse, pale, a strange softness among harder things. It is shoveled into the trench with the same resigned care, spread into place until the colour forms a thin, even band across the gravel. You drag your sandal through it lightly, watching how the grains collapse into one another, creating a surface that looks delicate but isn't. Sand is patient. It absorbs the blows that stone would reject. You compact it with your feet first, feeling the subtle give beneath your heel. It presses back gently, warming under the friction. As you walk, your steps become metronomes, marking time in the language of pressure. Every grain shifts into alignment beneath your stride, creating a bed that will never hold your own journey. Another layer follows, crushed stone, heavier and sharper than the gravel before it. You carry it in piles that threaten to spill from your arms, the edges scraping your skin in small, precise lines. The stones smell faintly of the earth they once anchored, before some pickaxe convinced them to be useful. You spread them evenly, adjusting the distribution with a practiced eye. The surface becomes a mosaic of muted greys, each piece fitting together, not through artistry, but through persistence. As you work, the sun warms your shoulders in slow increments. It does not comfort you, it simply exists, as indifferent as Rome's ambitions. Sweat gathers in the creases of your elbows, beading into small temporary jewels, before running down into the dust. You wipe your brow, pushing grit from your eyelashes. The world blurs briefly, then sharpens again, like a blade pulled across a whetstone. The tamping begins anew. The tool rises and falls in a slow, methodical rhythm. The sound is heavy, rhythmic, almost pulse-like. You feel it in your wrists, in your forearms, in the base of your spine. Every strike presses the stone deeper into its place, forcing it to understand its role in the road's anatomy. You move in tandem with others, the group forming a quiet chain of downward force. The thudding becomes a kind of shared heartbeat, slow and steady, a pulse that belongs to no one and everyone at once. Occasionally a stone shifts wrong, sticking out at a stubborn angle. You kneel, adjust it, press it into alignment. There is a strange tenderness to the motion, as though you're coaxing the road into existence rather than building it through force. You know better. Nothing here is gentle, but pretending costs nothing and sometimes helps the hours move. Above the trench, the world continues without noticing you. Birds circle lazily in the warm currents. A shepherd guides his flock across a distant hill, their silhouettes drifting like slow-moving clouds. A breeze carries the faint smell of crushed grass and distant pine. These small intrusions of normalcy feel like memories borrowed from someone else's life. You bend, lift, spread, tamp, layers thicken, patterns form. The trench becomes less an absence and more a beginning. Your feet begin to ache, a dull heat forming at the edges of your sandals. You shift your weight, but the ache follows you, clinging with quiet determination. Fatigue threads itself through your muscles with the steadiness of a vine growing across stone. It does not ask permission. It simply arrives and stays. At one point, you pause and look down the length of the trench. The layered foundation stretches forward, a muted stripe of purpose running across the land. It is not beautiful, though there is an honesty in its construction. You imagine travelers centuries from now, soldiers, merchants, wanderers, crossing this ground without once considering the hours compressed beneath their feet. Their journeys will be smoother than yours, carried by the very stones that drained you. The irony settles in your chest without bitterness. It's too heavy to be called irony, too expected to be called injustice. It simply is. Another basket of gravel arrives. You pour it out and watch it fall into place. The stones settle with a sound like distant rain, soft and persistent. You level the surface with practice motions, catching pebbles that bounce toward the edges and drawing them back into line. Even the smallest pieces are not allowed to wander. Rome does not tolerate wandering. More sand, more crushed stone, more tamping. The sequence becomes a slow meditation, the kind that empties the mind not by piece but by repetition. You think of nothing and everything, of the way the sun slants across the field, of the faint hum of insects rising with the heat, of the scent of distant smoke from campfires already being prepared. Each thought flickers and then dissolves under the weight of the next motion. You step onto the compacted layer to test it. It holds. The surface shifts, only slightly, settling beneath your heel in a subtle exhale. You walk its length, each step confirming what your body already knows, that these layers will outlive you in ways your name never will. A fellow worker hands you a tamping board with a faint nod. The gesture is small, almost invisible, but it carries the understanding of someone who has the same dust woven into the creases of his knuckles. You accept it, gripping the handle with fingers that tremble, more from use than from strain. The tamping begins again. Slow, heavy, necessary. By now the trench has transformed into something that resembles a cradle, a structure built to hold the weight of futures that will never require your name or your thanks. You smooth the final layer with the flat of your foot, making sure the transition between sections is clean, unbroken. The surface shows no sign of the dozens of hands that shaped it. When you straighten, the light has shifted again, stretching your shadow long across the layered foundation. It looks thin, almost fragile compared to the sturdiness beneath it. You take a breath, letting the dust settle inside your lungs like an old tenant returning home. Ahead, the next section waits. Raw earth, untouched, unshaped, expecting gravity and time to keep it safe until your tools arrive. But your tools always arrive. You step forward again. The layered trench behind you, settling into permanence, the empty ground ahead, already yielding to the weight of your footsteps. The light sharpens while you move from one stretch of packed earth to the next. It climbs, spreading across the landscape with the slow certainty of something that has no intention of being merciful. You notice the warmth creeping up your neck before you acknowledge the sun itself, the sky brightening into a hard, flat glare that insists on being felt rather than admired. By the time midday reaches its full posture, the heat is a weight in its own right. It settles onto your shoulders with the authority of a supervisor, heavy and unquestionable. The air thickens as if every breath must push through another layer of the day. You pause for just a moment, long enough to drag your sleeve across your forehead. The cloth comes back damp, streaked with dust that clings like a fingerprint left by the hours. You continue walking the length of the foundation, your sandals scuffing against the compacted layers you spent the morning shaping. The stones beneath the surface radiate warmth now, each one holding a quiet pulse of heat that seeps into your soles. It feels like standing on a promise the sun made to itself, one that you never agreed to be part of. Nearby, workers shift their weight from foot to foot, trying to find patches of shade that don't exist. The land is too open, too obedient to the Empire's need for visibility. Shadows retreat toward the edges of the carts and tools, thin slivers of mercy that offer only enough room for thought, never for rest. Someone tilts a water skin toward his mouth, drinking in slow, measured swallows, as though he's negotiating with the very idea of thirst. Your own throat feels dry, scraped by the dust that drifted into it earlier. You lift your water skin, letting the warm liquid coat your tongue. It tastes faintly of leather and iron, flavors that have become inseparable from the work itself. The water offers no coolness, only the confirmation that you can keep moving. A shout cuts faintly across the field, not sharp enough to be urgent, merely functional. It is the overseer, directing the next phase of laying stones, his voice flattened by distance and the steady weight of the afternoon. The call carries an assumption that everyone hears it, understands it, obeys it, and everyone does. Not out of fear exactly, but because the alternative requires explanations that would only lead back to the same tasks. You heft a large stone from the pile, feeling its heat seep into your palms. It is not scolding, just insistent. The stone seems almost alive, warmed through by the sun's relentless attention. You lift it to your shoulder, adjusting your stance so that the weight rests against the curve of your muscle. It sits there, with the familiarity of something that has spent too long being carried. The path ahead wavers slightly in the heat, the air shimmering as though the road itself is being reconsidered by the world. You walk toward it, stone balanced, steps steady. The shimmering does not deceive you. You know exactly how far you have to go because the line does not change its mind. Only the land flickers. Dust rises with each footfall, hovering briefly before it settles back onto your skin, adding another thin coat to the layers already there. It creates a quiet film over your arms, dulling the light and making everything feel a shade heavier. You breathe through it, letting the grit line your lungs with the same resigned patience that fills your muscles. At the designated spot, you lower the stone with a slow exhale. The sound it makes, heavy, certain, final, adds itself to dozens of others placed moments before. The road's foundation grows more solid with every piece, each stone joining an unspoken commitment to carry strangers who will never consider its origins. You adjust its position, nudging it slightly with your foot until it settles into the precise angle required. No one checks your work, not immediately, at least. There is a trust here, built not on admiration, but on exhaustion. If you know how to lift a stone, you know how to place it. And if you don't, the day will teach you quickly. More stones arrive, carried by men bent under the same heat that folds across your shoulders. They move like figures carved into friezes. Forward, load, step, unload, repeat. Their silhouettes blur at the edges where the sunlight presses too hard. You join them, falling back into the rhythm without needing to find it first. Rhythms are loyal. They wait for you. As the work continues, the road begins to show faint signs of its future. The long stretch of placed stones forms a rough surface, uneven for now, but full of intention. You step across it, feeling the difference beneath your feet. The stones hold their heat like memories, some warmer than others, depending on when they were placed. You walk slowly, the sun drawing sweat down your spine, in thin, persistent lines. The overseer approaches, his face shaded by the folds of a worn cloth draped over his head. He looks at the line of stones, squinting with an expression that suggests consideration rather than doubt. He points to a section where the stones slope slightly, and a pair of workers nod. They begin adjusting the alignment without complaint. Their movements are gentle but certain, shaping the road with the care of sculptors who will never sign their work. You keep placing stones, one after another. Some are smooth and manageable, others are jagged, biting at your fingers, as if reminding you they once belonged somewhere else. The heat makes everything louder inside your body, the beat of your heart, the pulse in your wrists, the tired swell of your breath. Yet outwardly, the world remains quiet. Only the clack of stone against stone breaks the stillness, and even that seems smothered by the midday glare. The sun shows no inclination to move. It hangs above you with the stillness of a judge listening to arguments it has already dismissed. Your tunic clings to your back, damp and coarse. The fabric rubs against your skin with each motion, a small but persistent friction that becomes its own kind of fatigue. You shift occasionally, seeking relief that never fully comes. When you lift another stone, your arms quiver briefly, not from weakness exactly, but from the hours accumulating inside them. You steady the stone, restoring the balance between effort and control. The work allows no urgency. It requires precision disguised as monotony. A breeze stirs at last, soft and faint, carrying with it the dusty scent of worked earth mixed with the distant sap of fractured trees. It brushes your cheek, offering a momentary illusion of relief before disappearing. The heat returns immediately, as though offended by the interruption. By now, the road behind you stretches in a line of rough completeness. Stone, heat, effort pressed into a pattern that makes sense only from the perspective of someone far removed from the work. You don't look back at it long. Looking back serves no function. The stones ahead are waiting. You take another from the pile, adjusting your grip so its weight distributes evenly. The sun rests heavily on the back of your neck, heating the strands of dust that cling to your skin. You move forward, careful not to misstep on the shifting ground. Each footfall is measured, deliberate, and the world narrows into a series of controlled motions. Somewhere beyond the rise, you hear the faint call of a bird, shrill, brief, unconcerned by labour. Its cry sounds almost mocking in its freedom. You let the sound pass through you without reaction. You have learned how to work beneath things that cannot be changed. Another stone settles into place. Another layer of road becomes real. The air shimmers again, the heat bending light into a wavering ribbon that dances across the horizon. Your vision swims slightly, but your body continues with the certainty of habit. Habit is stronger than discomfort. At some point, the overseer murmurs something to his scribe, who scratches notes onto a wax tablet with a stylus dulled by use. Neither of them looks up long, neither has to. The sun watches everything for them. A long, dragging breath leaves your lungs, the kind deep enough to remind you that your ribs are still capable of motion, even if they protest. You wipe the sweat from your palms, drying them against the fabric of your tunic, and lift another stone. The road continues to grow across the land, straight and indifferent, a quiet testament to labour poured out under an unmoving sky. You place one more stone, nothing special about it, and feel your body accept the next small ache that comes with the motion. And then, without ceremony, you take another step forward, walking into the heat that waits patiently for you, as if it knew you would come. The stone leaves your hands with a muted finality, settling into the rising pattern of the road. Heat presses down harder now, flattening every sound until even your own breath becomes a subdued echo inside your chest. You shift slightly, rolling your shoulders to ease the tightness gathered there. It doesn't help. The heat has made your muscles feel like stretched cords, pliable enough to keep moving, but always one pull away from fraying. The next task comes without instruction. Your body knows it before your mind does. The tamping boards lie scattered nearby, handles worn smooth, from years of hands trying to keep rhythm with stones that never cooperate. You reach for one, lifting it by instinct. The wood is warm, holding the sun's imprint in every fibre. Your fingers curl around it, and for a moment you feel the quiet pulse of the day through the grain. You step onto the layered surface, letting your weight sink slightly into the stone base beneath. The ground gives only a fraction, resisting in the way built things do, unwilling to offer comfort but patient enough to take punishment. Dust has pooled in small pockets between the stones, thickened by the heat into fine, persistent clouds that barely need an excuse to rise. The first downward strike of the tamper sends a soft burst of dust around your ankles. It lifts with a sigh, pale and weightless, swirling in hesitant spirals. You breathe in and feel it settle inside your lungs with the smug confidence of a tenant who knows eviction is unlikely. There's no point trying to breathe shallowly. The work requires air, whether it tastes clean or not. Your next strike is steadier, the impact reverberating through your arms and down your spine. Dust rises again, thin, grey, purposeful. It hovers, then drifts into your mouth as you inhale to keep time with your movements. Your breath feels older immediately, as though age has been poured into you grain by grain. Each inhale drags through your throat with a texture you can almost count. Around you, others tamp their sections in quiet synchronization. The sound is rhythmic. Thud, thud, thud. It becomes a slow heartbeat beneath the sun, shared by bodies too tired to fight it. Dust trails from their motions as well, forming small plumes that drift between workers like hesitant ghosts. You catch glimpses of faces through the haze, eyes narrowed, mouths set in lines carved from repetition. No one shows discomfort. It is simply the price of making something useful. Your chest tightens faintly, not from effort but from accumulation. Dust clings to the inside of your lungs with the confidence of something settling in for the long term. You exhale sharply, as if that will remove it. It doesn't. If anything, the exhale stirs more dust from the ground. It's a cycle with a sense of humour. Dry, persistent, slightly cruel. You keep tamping. The day shifts around you in nearly invisible increments. Shadows sharpen under your feet, then smear as the sun leans westward. The tamping board grows heavier, though you cannot tell whether the weight comes from your own fatigue or from the tool's own resignation. Your palms burn slightly where the wood rubs skin against bone. You adjust your grip, even though you know the relief will last only a few strikes. The dust rises with predictable loyalty each time you press downward. Some of it catches the light, turning golden before it vanishes into the next breath you drag into your lungs. The sensation becomes familiar. A dry scrape, a subtle clog, a reminder that the road demands more than muscle. It requests parts of your breathing, your voice, the future ease of your chest. You give those up without ceremony. A breeze stirs briefly, lifting a wide sheet of dust across the surface of the road in progress. It moves with surprising elegance, folding itself along the contours of the stones like a thin fabric. You turn your head slightly, letting the breeze cool your cheek for the moment it exists, but it fades as quickly as it arrives, leaving behind a thicker haze that settles across your shoulders. Someone nearby coughs, a short, stifled sound. Not violent, not disruptive, just an involuntary acknowledgement of the world being built into your lungs. The worker straightens again and continues tamping. The rhythm doesn't break, not even when the cough returns as a softer echo. Dust is part of the job, like weight and sun and silence. There's no point giving it too much attention. You lower the tamper again, the board striking stone with a dull firmness that sends another plume upward. You watch the rising dust with a sort of resigned curiosity. You know exactly where it will go. It always chooses the same destination. Forward, upward, then inward. Your breath grows slower, thicker. You take in air as though drawing it through cloth, feeling the resistance with each inhale. The dust changes the sound of your breathing too, making it quieter, as if each breath is being muffled by the day itself. Oddly, the stillness this creates inside your chest feels almost like a form of peace, heavy but steady. The sun angles lower now, stretching your shadow long across the unfinished surface. It merges with the shadows of other workers, forming a dark lattice across the road. The silhouettes shake gently with each strike of the tamper, looking like a series of thin trees bending under invisible wind. Your hands numb slightly from repetition. Fingertips tingle, your shoulders hum with fatigue, the tamper feels fused to your palms, though you're aware that your grip still tightens and loosens with each motion. You lift, lower, compress, lift, lower, compress. The pattern becomes as natural as breathing, which is ironic, considering the dust has claimed that too. Occasionally, the tamped layer needs adjusting. You kneel, run your fingers across the surface, feeling for inconsistencies. Your hand returns coated in a fine sheet of powder. When you brush it away, the air carries it directly into your nose. You sniff reflexively, then regret it immediately. The dust settles deeper, adding to the quiet weight inside your lungs. You resume tamping, your movements slower now, but no less precise. Precision matters more than speed. The road's future travellers will blame the stones, not their builder, if the foundation shifts. You imagine those travellers, merchants with carts, soldiers with armour, messengers carrying news of emperors and wars. Their footsteps will be cleaner than yours, their lungs freer. They will pass quickly, their shadows brushing the road without knowing what lies beneath them. Someone hands you a water skin. The gesture is brief, casual, but it carries a small kindness in the midst of work that rarely makes room for such things. You drink. The water is warm again, but it cuts through the dust in your throat enough for you to continue breathing without wincing. You nod your thanks. The other worker nods back, already turning to his section. More dust lifts with every movement. It becomes a constant companion, settling into the creases of your tunic, coating the hairs on your arms, lining your lips with a faint, gritty reminder of the earth you're rearranging. You breathe it in with steady resignation. Oxygen is non-negotiable. Dust is not concerned. You take one more deep breath, a thick, weighted inhale that fills your lungs with the taste of the day. As you exhale, you watch the dust drift outward, spreading across the compacted surface. It settles back into the road, as though claiming ownership of the work you've done. Your arms lift again. The tamper rises. Dust waits for the next impact. And as the board strikes the stone with another muffled thud, you feel the day sink deeper into your lungs, where it will stay far longer than the road will remember you. The tamper leaves the ground with a slow final lift, your arms hovering in the warm air before gravity reminds them to rest. Dust drifts across the surface like a thin veil, softening the sharpness of the stones, but never disguising their weight. You inhale once more, feeling the familiar scratch at the back of your throat, and let the breath settle into the dryness, now woven into your lungs. A quiet gesture from the overseer redirects the workers toward the next stretch of land, an area where the ground darkens into a muddied patch shaped by a wandering stream. You feel the shift in the air before you step toward it, a cooler note, a hint of water moving somewhere beneath the soil. Your feet sink slightly when you reach the marshy edge, the mud wrapping around your sandals like something with an unsettling sense of humour. Water has gathered in shallow pools, collecting the sun's reflection in trembling fragments. The puddles shine with deceptive calm, but the mud beneath them carries a stubbornness you've learned to recognise. It clings to tools, to boots, to resolve. The Empire wants the road straight, dry and obedient. The land, however, has a personality, and it shows it most clearly in places like this. You wade forward, the ground pulling at your ankles with slow, sticky insistence. Each step creates a small suction that tries to hold you in place, a reminder that the earth does not agree with the plans drawn above it. You shift your weight carefully, testing the firmness of each patch before trusting it. The mud shifts regardless. The others join you, spreading out with practiced awareness. Together, you examine the ground, looking for places where the water collects, where it seeps up unexpectedly, where the mud thickens into a warning. You find the small stream feeding the marsh, a thin ribbon of water trickling between reeds, ignoring the orders no one has yet spoken aloud. It continues its slow journey, confident in its right to wander. A worker hands you a wooden stake, and you drive it into the soft earth to mark the beginning of the diversion trench. The stake sinks faster than expected, disappearing halfway before you even apply real pressure. You pull it back up, mud coating its length, and plant it again, this time angling it slightly so it anchors into a firmer layer. It holds, though it leans as if skeptical. The shovels dig into the wet soil with a sound different from dry earth, heavy, squelching, almost apologetic. You carve a shallow channel, guiding the water away from the future road with slow, measured strokes. The stream in Mount does not protest loudly. It simply shifts course with a kind of patient resistance, flowing into the ditch as if indulging a temporary request rather than obeying a permanent command. As you deepen the channel, water begins to pool around your feet. You step aside, letting it pass. It curls around your ankles, cool against the heat still radiating from the earlier work. For a moment, the sensation is almost refreshing, until the mud beneath it loosens further, pulling at your sandals with renewed irritation. You lift your foot slowly, feeling the suction release with a reluctant gurgle. Planks arrive next, rough boards cut from trees whose lives once involved far fewer demands. You position them across the messier patches, creating makeshift walkways to keep workers from sinking too deeply. The boards wobble underfoot, their surfaces slick with mud and moisture. You step carefully, placing your weight toward the center so the ends don't dip into the water below. One board creaks loudly as you cross it, bending slightly under your weight. The sound feels like a warning, though you know the board will survive long enough to serve its purpose. Everything here survives, just long enough. Permanence is reserved for the road alone. Nearby, someone drains a puddle by digging a narrow trench leading away from it. Water rushes into the new channel with quiet enthusiasm, as though relieved to have a direction. The puddle shrinks gradually, leaving behind a thick bed of mud that glistens mockingly in the sun. You pretend not to notice the way it seems amused. Mud has a strange talent for making you feel like the punchline to a joke it won't explain. Your own trench deepens. You widen it, carve its sides cleaner, guide the stream into a straighter course. The water slides along the channel, adjusting its flow with a patience the Empire would never show any worker. You admire it briefly, its refusal to be hurried, its ability to reshape itself without complaint. Then you move on, because admiration doesn't compact a road. Tools sink into the soil with varying degrees of cooperation. Some areas give easily, softened by water. Others resist with a stubborn clumpiness that sends vibrations up your arms. Every handful of mud is a different negotiation, but each one ends the same way. Another section of marsh replaced by an approximation of order. You take a moment to scrape your sandal against a plank, removing mud that has gathered in a thick, clinging layer. It comes off reluctantly, stretching like dough before snapping free. The plank, now smeared with the residue, groans under your shifting weight. Even the wood is growing tired. Your hands grow slick with moisture as you lift another board into place. The texture of wet mud mixed with sweat turns your grip unreliable, forcing you to tighten your hold until your knuckles ache. You press the board down onto the marshy surface, letting it settle into a position that's good enough. Perfection is not the goal here. Stability is. The afternoon light softens slightly, though the heat does not. It lingers stubbornly above the marsh, turning the water's surface into mirrors that catch the brightness and throw it back at you. You squint, eyes narrowing against the glare. The reflections blur, shimmering between reality and illusion. The mud continues to complain underfoot. It gurgles quietly with each step, forming small circles around your footprints. Water seeps upward without permission, making the land feel alive in a way that does not comfort you. You keep working because stopping would be noticed. After hours of cutting channels and laying planks, the marsh begins to show reluctant signs of transformation. Water flows along the new paths, guided by trenches designed to outsmart its wandering nature. Patches of ground begin to firm up, allowing the first thin layers of gravel to be carried over and spread gently across the surface. You scoop gravel into your basket, feeling the faint roughness of each stone through the woven fibers. As you spread it across the damp soil, The stones cling to the moisture, settling in with a sound softer than usual. The gravel creates a barrier between the road and the mud's slow hunger, though you know the mud will try to reclaim it eventually. Everything the Empire builds, the earth quietly plans to repossess. You tamp the gravel lightly, enough to settle it, but not enough to force water back to the surface. Dust does not rise here. Instead, a faint mist of moisture hovers near the stones before dissolving into the heat. You breathe it in, finding it kinder than dust, though it carries the same inevitability. The workers spread out, addressing remaining patches of softness. Wooden stakes mark the sections still too wet to support the road. Tools sink into mud, pull through it, reshape it. The land adapts slowly, begrudgingly, the way a stubborn animal might accept a bridle. It does not fully submit, but it stops resisting openly. Your hands smell of wet soil and sun-warmed wood. Your sandals weigh more with each layer of mud that tries to hitch a ride. You scrape them again, the sound of mud peeling away, vaguely satisfying, like removing a small annoyance from a much larger one. When you straighten, the marsh looks different. Not dry, not conquered, just altered, diverted enough for the Empire to impose its will without sinking. Water now follows channels it didn't choose. The mud lies flatter, compressed under planks and gravel. The beginnings of a road stretch into it with quiet determination. A single droplet gathers at the edge of a plank and falls, landing in a small puddle that ripples outward. The water circles once, twice, then smooths itself back into stillness, as if deciding the interruption wasn't worth acknowledging. You take a step back, letting your gaze travel down the length of the transformed ground. It isn't finished, it isn't stable, but it is moving towards something the Empire will call progress. Your feet sink slightly as you turn, but the mud releases you with less reluctance than before. The stream flows beside you now, redirected but unbroken, murmuring to itself in tones too soft for interpretation. You adjust the tool in your hand and walk toward the next stretch of softened earth, the planks creaking beneath your weight, the water reshaping itself in the channels you carved, and the mud settling into a silence that feels neither defeated nor victorious. Just patient. Patient in a way the Empire will never understand. The ground firms beneath your feet, only in patches, each one a temporary agreement between water and earth. You test the stability with your heel before stepping fully, letting the mud reluctantly release its claim on you. The trenches guide the redirected stream away, murmuring quietly to itself as it slips along the path you carved. The air above the wet soil feels heavy, carrying the scent of damp clay and sun-warmed planks. You lift your shovel from where it rests against a half-buried stone. The tool feels heavier now, not because of the mud caked along its edge, but because the day has soaked into its handle. The wood holds heat and moisture in equal measure, its grains swollen slightly from the marsh. You curl your fingers around it anyway, letting the familiar shape settle into your palm like an old argument that neither side is willing to revisit. Nearby, the pickaxe waits with the same patient indifference. Its iron head is browned from years of soil and sweat, its handle smoothed to a dull shine where countless hands have worn it down. You take it up, balancing the weight in your grip. The distribution is imperfect, just as it always is. Tools like these are not designed for comfort. They are designed for necessity. You sling the pick over your shoulder and walk toward the next stretch of ground, an area where the foundation must be cleared of stones, too stubborn for shovels to coax aside. The sun leans westward now, but its heat clings to your back with the same insistence it held at midday. Sweat gathers beneath your tunic, soaking the fabric into your skin. You ignore it. Everything clings to you out here. Dust, mud, heat, obligation. A worker beside you lifts his own pick, the motion mirroring yours with an ease born not of coordination, but of shared resignation. You both know the sequence, the rhythm, the dull ache that will follow. He nods once, not a greeting, not encouragement, merely acknowledgement that the tools have chosen both of you for another round. You step to the first embedded stone, half hidden in the soil. Its surface is rough, flecked with dirt, edges softened by years of being pressed into the ground. You raise the pick, feeling the handle shift slightly under your grip. The movement is familiar, almost comforting in its predictability. The iron head arcs downward with a muted whistle, striking the stone with a satisfying crack. The vibration climbs up your arms, settling into your elbows before fading into the steady hum of fatigue. Another swing, another crack. The stone shifts just enough to show it felt the impact. You wedge the pick's tip underneath and pry, muscles tightening in a slow, controlled strain. The stone rolls free with a reluctant scrape, exposing a patch of darker soil beneath. You drag it aside, leaving it for someone else to haul later. The pick remains in your hand, ready for the next unwilling piece of ground. Around you, tools rise and fall in quiet unison. The air fills with the muted percussion of iron against earth, soft where soil absorbs the strike, sharp where stone rejects it. The rhythm builds, not energetic, but steady, a heartbeat made of labour rather than life. Your hands adjust on the handle, finding the same grooves they've held 100 times. The wood is warm, slick with the oils of sweat and use. You tighten your grip to keep it from slipping, though you know you'll feel the marks later. Faint ridges burned into your palms. Every tool here leaves its signature on the body. Over time, you learn to read them like dates in a ledger. A hammer lies nearby, resting against a pile of smaller stones. You switch tools, letting the pick rest for a moment. The hammer's weight surprises you, though it shouldn't. Its balance uneven, its head slightly loose from repeated blows. You tap it against a stone to test the handle. The vibration tells you it will hold, at least for now. If it doesn't, someone will repair it with rope and determination. Two supplies the Empire never runs out of. You strike a stone to split it, the hammer landing with a dull, efficient thud. The stone cracks along a natural line, revealing a pale interior untouched by sun or time. You split it again, reducing it to pieces small enough to fit into the roadbed. Dust rises from the fracture, coating your knuckles in a thin layer of chalk-like grit. You inhale without meaning to. The dust settles again, this time deeper, joining everything else that has taken up residence inside you. A younger worker approaches with a basket of crushed rock. His shoulders slope beneath the weight, his breath shallow but determined. You take a handful from the basket and spread it along the edge of the prepared ground. He gives a small nod, the kind that says only that the work continues, as it must. You return the gesture and lift the hammer again. You swing until your arms feel as though they belong to someone else, someone whose bones are hollow, whose strength is borrowed. The repetition of the motion steals thought from your mind, leaving only the sequence: lift, aim, strike, inhale. Each strike sends a faint ring through the handle, a vibration just shy of pain. It lingers briefly before dissolving into the thicker ache already dwelling in your muscles. A gust of wind stirs the dust at your feet, lifting it into a swirling cloud. The particles catch the sunlight, turning momentarily bright before settling across your skin. You wipe your forearm across your brow, leaving a faint streak of dirt behind. The tools do not pause for weather, neither do you. You return the hammer to the pile and take up the shovel again. The blade is chipped at the edges, the handle wrapped with a thin strip of leather where the wood once cracked. Your fingers find the leather's rough texture instinctively. It bites into your skin, but it also anchors your grip. You push the shovel into the loosened soil, lifting clumps of dirt and stone into a growing mound. The earth is stubborn here, clinging to the blade with a weight disproportionate to its size. Your breath deepens as you work, each inhale pulling through the lingering dust, each exhale carrying the faint sound of effort. You keep the rhythm steady, controlled. The shovel sinks, the soil rises. The motion becomes a loop that carries you forward through the hours. Somewhere nearby, a worker sharpens his pick against a flat stone, sending sparks into the air. They flash briefly before dying against the dirt. He tests the edge with his thumb, nods in satisfaction, and returns to the trench. The tools demand as much maintenance as the road itself. Nothing here stays sharp on its own. You swap your shovel for the pick once more, your hands settling into the familiar grooves, as though greeting an old companion. The weight presses into your palm like memory. You raise it again, swinging with a motion shaped by routine rather than intention. The strike lands solidly, and the ground yields by degrees. A small stone jumps from the impact, bouncing across your foot before settling into the grass. You ignore it. You've ignored worse. The pick rises and falls again, each swing measured, each strike another reminder that innovation is not coming. The tools remain the same, century after century, as if Rome believes progress belongs only in stone, never in the hands that lift it. The sun lowers, softening its edge, but not its persistence. Shadows lengthen across the site, forming thin bars of darkness that crawl over your boots. The tools feel heavier now, though not from physical change. Weight accumulates through time, settling into the wood, the iron, the body that wields them. As you pry another stone from the earth, your wrists tremble with the strain. You steady yourself, breathe through it, let the tremor pass. The stone rolls free at last, thudding softly into the grass. You exhale, feeling a small rush of relief that dissipates almost immediately. Your hands tighten once more around the tool, its handle polished smooth by exhaustion, by repetition, by the long history of men whose names never mattered. The wood fits the shape of your grip because it has learned to, or perhaps you have learned to fit it. Either way, you lift the pick again, and as the iron arcs through the fading light, you understand the quiet truth of your labour. The tools will outlast you, because they never change. You change around them. The pick's final stroke sinks into the soil, with a muted thud that barely stirs the air. Evening has crept in quietly, dissolving the hard edges of the work site. The shadows cast by carts and tools lengthen into thin, stretched lines that blur into one another. Your arms hang at your sides for a moment, the weight of the day pooling in your elbows and wrists. The light has softened too far to continue, and everyone recognizes that unspoken rule. When you can't see the stones well enough to curse them, the day is done. You wipe your palms against your tunic, feeling the grit scrape away in rough streaks. The air cools by degrees, slipping between the folds of your clothing and resting against your skin with a gentleness that feels almost unfamiliar after so many hours of the sun leaning on you. The tools return to their lean-to against a wagon, each one propped in a way that suggests an exhaustion of their own. You place your pick carefully among them, letting its handle rest where others have rested theirs. The wood no longer feels warm, it holds the temperature of evening now. Cool, quiet, relieved of duty until dawn demands otherwise. You turn toward the distant shape of camp, a modest cluster of tents and makeshift shelters arranged in loose circles. The ground between the site and the camp bears the imprint of countless tired steps, each one a shallow dent that echoes the days before. You follow them, feeling the ache in your calves bloom with each motion. The land dips gently, carrying you down toward the scattered glow of fires being coaxed to life. As you walk, the air fills with the faint smell of smoke, soft, almost sweet, mingling with the lingering scent of sun-warmed dirt. Shadows flicker ahead, bending and shifting as workers gather around small fires to prepare the evening meal. Their movements are slow, deliberate, stripped of the urgency that defined the daylight hours. The day has taken what it wanted. Night asks for much less. You reach the camp just as someone sets a pot over a low flame. The broth inside swirls lazily, steam rising in thin coils that disappear into the cooling air. You settle onto a worn log near one of the fires, your body grateful for the support, even if the wood offers little comfort. Other workers gather around, forming a quiet ring around the heat. No one speaks immediately. The silence is not heavy, just tired, like a room that sighs when the last task is finished. Someone hands you a small wooden bowl. You take it, the warmth seeping through your fingers. The food inside is simple. A ladle of barley, a slice of bread, a few pieces of something that once had the ambition to be vegetables. You eat slowly, letting the heat anchor you back into yourself. The flavors are muted, but they're familiar. They belong to the part of the day that asks nothing of you except that you swallow. Around the camp, faces soften in the firelight. Sharp lines carved by sun and labour blur into gentler shapes. Eyes that spent the day squinting at stone now drift upward, toward the darkening sky. The first stars begin to appear, tiny unwavering points of quiet light. They hover above the camp as though observing from a distance, uninvested in the Empire's ambitions or the road carving its way across the land. You find yourself staring at them longer than usual. The stars feel like the only things that stay still, the only part of the world that does not demand straight lines or foundations or obedience. They shine because shining is what they do, not because someone ordered it. Your breath slows, not out of peace exactly, but out of inevitability. The air is cooler now, brushing your face with the faintest trace of night moisture. You inhale deeply, feeling for a moment the absence of dust. It's a small relief, temporary, but you take it anyway. Some luxuries are measured in seconds. Someone pokes at the fire with a stick, stirring embers into bright little bursts that hover before fading into the dark. The crackling merges with the soft murmur of the stream you redirected earlier. Its flow now distant enough to be no more than a suggestion. The sound settles you, anchoring your senses to something other than the weight of tools and the repetition they impose. A conversation begins near you, low, almost murmured. Two workers discuss the day in terms that feel more like reflections than complaints. One mentions a stubborn stone, another mentions a misaligned board. The details drift between them without urgency. No one expects solutions. The road will continue tomorrow, as it always does, indifferent to every small story beneath its surface. You finish your meal and hold the bowl loosely in your hands, feeling the warmth fade. The stars gather in larger numbers now, filling the sky with a quiet confidence that stretches from horizon to horizon. It's impossible not to notice how the night seems bigger out here, unhindered by walls or roofs or the illusions of permanence. You feel very small beneath it, but not in a way that unsettles you. Smallness here is honest. Crickets begin to hum at the edges of the camp. Their steady rhythmic song fills the spaces between breaths and footsteps. It is the kind of sound that asks nothing from you and gives just enough to ease the mind into stillness. You let your shoulders sag as the noise wraps around the camp like a blanket. A few men stretch out near their tents, settling onto thin mats or rolls of cloth. Some lie flat on their backs, hands folded over their stomachs, eyes fixed on the sky. Others sit with knees drawn to their chest, watching the fire dwindle. You rise from the log and make your way to your own small space, just a patch of ground softened slightly by the previous night's rest. You sit first, allowing your weight to sink into the earth, then lie back with slow deliberation. The ground is firm, but it accepts you without argument. Your muscles unwind one at a time, the tension leaving them in reluctant fragments. The air carries a faint breeze now, brushing across your face, cooling the sweat still clinging to your skin. Above you, the sky deepens into a darker blue, stars sharpening into clearer points. For a moment, you imagine the road stretching beneath them, a thin line cutting across distances the workers will never travel. The stars do not care whether the road is straight or crooked. They do not care about Rome or ambition or fatigue. They exist outside it all, untouched and untouchable. Your eyelids grow heavier. The day's work settles deeper into your bones, forming a quiet ache that pulses gently with your heartbeat. You breathe slowly, letting the cool air fill the spaces dust claimed earlier. Each inhale feels steadier. Each exhale feels like a release. Someone nearby snores softly, a low rumble that blends into the background noise. A few last embers pop in the fire pit. The night embraces the camp, with a patience the Empire would never show. You glance upward one last time. The stars shimmer without urgency, without expectation. They feel like companions, distant, indifferent, reliable. You let your eyes fall closed, the ground firm beneath your spine, the sky resting above you, the camp humming quietly, at the edge of nowhere. And in that stillness, you feel something close to rest forming around you, settling into the space. The tools have finally released. The night presses close, not heavy but full, filled with distant insects, soft breathing from the men around you, the low crackle of a fire nearly spent. You lie still on the firm earth, letting the faint breeze stroke across your face. The stars continue their unhurried watch overhead, as indifferent to your rest as they are to your labour. Sleep comes in thin layers, drifting over you in shallow waves. It is never deep, it is never generous. It stays just long enough to loosen the tightness in your chest before slipping away again. Eventually, the grey suggestion of dawn gathers at the horizon. It spreads quietly, as if trying not to disturb the camp too abruptly. You open your eyes to the cool light, your mind waking before your body decides to cooperate. The air feels cleaner in the early hour, unclaimed by dust or heat. You breathe it in, letting the freshness settle somewhere your lungs still have room. Around you, others shift on their mats, the subtle rustling of cloth and limbs signalling the reluctant beginning of another day. When you rise, the stiffness in your back reminds you that the ground was never meant to be kind. You stretch in slow increments, careful not to push anything beyond what the morning can tolerate. The fire has died entirely now, leaving only faint traces of heat beneath the ash. You nudge it lightly with your foot, watching a few embers glow before fading. Breakfast is simple. Bread torn in uneven pieces, a sip of water still cool from the night. You eat without hurry, letting the small amount of food sit comfortably in your stomach. It won't last long, but it will do enough to start the day. The camp stirs into motion with its usual unspoken rhythm. Tools are lifted, belts tightened, sandals retied. You gather your own gear, a shovel, a pick, a tamping board worn by yesterday, and the countless yesterdays before it. The weight feels familiar in your hands, not welcome, but recognized. As the sun begins to climb, you walk toward the stretch of road, already finished, enough to be used. It lies ahead with a quiet confidence, its stones fitting together in the straight, stubborn way Rome insists upon. The early light glints off its surface, giving it a sheen that makes it look almost proud. You're adjusting a stone along the edge when footsteps sound behind you. Light, quick, soft. They differ from the heavy, deliberate strides of workers. These steps belong to people unburdened by the road's making. A small group approaches along the finished section. Travellers in worn cloaks, their tunics cleaner than yours, but still carrying signs of long journeys. A merchant with a pack slung across his back. A young woman walking beside an older man who uses a staff to steady himself. A soldier off duty, his armour replaced by simple linen, his sword dangling casually at his side. They walk with ease, their steps tapping lightly against the stones that have absorbed the weight of far harder labour. Their pace is unhurried, and their faces reflect none of the strain that anchors your own. They look ahead, never downward, never imagining the layers beneath them. The gravel, the sand, the crushed stone, the compacted earth, the blisters, the breathlessness. You pause in your work, not because you need the rest, but because their presence shifts the air around you. The merchant passes first, humming softly to himself, his gaze scanning the horizon for something that interests him more than the ground beneath his feet. His boots tread the surface with a confidence that comes only from travel made easy. The young woman offers a polite nod as she walks by. She doesn't slow, she doesn't need to. Her sandals barely make a sound. You nod back, though you doubt she notices. Her attention is on the distant hills, not the hands that shaped the path she follows. The older man's staff taps rhythmically against the stones, each strike sending a faint vibration through the surface. He mutters something to his companion, a casual observation, perhaps about weather or distance or memories of another place. His staff leaves small marks as he moves, tiny impressions that will wear away within hours. The soldier stops briefly to adjust the strap of his bag. His eyes drift across the line of workers, preparing the next stretch of road, but do not linger long enough to register recognition. To him, the road is a convenience, not a creation. He offers a half smile that says more about his mood than any respect for the labour around him, then continues on his way. Their footsteps fade gradually, swallowed by the open landscape ahead. The road carries them forward effortlessly, without so much as a whisper of the strain buried beneath its surface. You watch until their figures shrink into the horizon, becoming little more than small movements against the land. There's a strange stillness that follows travellers, an echo of their ease that clashes with the memory of your labour. It doesn't hurt, it doesn't bother you, it simply exists, like everything else in this work, something observed, acknowledged, and then folded into the silence. You lower your gaze back to the stone you are adjusting. The road's edge looks nearly straight now, though a small ridge of soil needs clearing. You run your hand along the warm surface, feeling the faint texture of the stones. Smooth in some places, rough in others. The warmth surprises you, though it shouldn't. Even this early, the sun has begun its slow advance, claiming the road in the same way it claims your shoulders. You lift your shovel and begin smoothing the soil. The motion is steady, calming in its own way. The sound of metal scraping earth pulls you back into the rhythm of work. Around you, others join in, tools scraping, lifting, tamping in quiet harmony. The thought lingers in your mind. Travellers walk lightly, not because they mean to, but because the road lets them. That is the point. That is the system. You build something meant to feel effortless for everyone except those who construct it. The stream you redirected yesterday murmurs faintly in the background, contributing its own indifferent commentary. Birds circle overhead, occasionally perching on posts or branches to watch the workers below. Their songs sound almost cheerful in the cool morning, though they, too, owe nothing to the path beneath them. You straighten and stretch your back, listening to the subtle crack along your spine. The movement offers brief relief before settling back into the dull ache you've grown accustomed to. You wipe your palms against your tunic, knowing the dust will simply redistribute itself. More travellers appear throughout the morning, single riders, pairs of merchants, a small group of children chasing a stray goat. Their footsteps echo lightly across the stones, unconcerned, unaware. Some speak softly to themselves, some laugh, some walk with the single-minded focus of people who know where they are going. Not one of them looks down. You don't expect them to. People rarely consider the foundation beneath their convenience. They see the road as part of the world, like rivers or mountains, something that simply exists, timeless and uncreated. The idea that it comes from the hands of exhausted workers feels almost incompatible with the ease it offers. Still, a small part of you watches them with a quiet curiosity. You study the way they move, how they trust the road completely, how they never hesitate to step where you've laboured. There is a simplicity in their confidence, a kind of innocence built on ignorance. You don't fault them for it. Ignorance, after all, is much lighter to carry than stones. A cart rattles past, pulled by a single mule, whose hooves strike the road with crisp, punctual beats. The driver barely glances at you, his attention fixed on the sky, as if judging how much daylight he has left. The cart's wheels roll smoothly across the stones. Your stones, barely jostling the cargo. The ease of the motion feels like a quiet insult and a subtle compliment at the same time. Once the travellers have moved beyond the finished stretch, you return fully to your task. The unfinished road ahead demands its due. You adjust your grip on the shovel, bending into the work with a calm that feels almost rehearsed. The dust rises again. The sun warms the back of your neck. The hours stretch forward, but for a moment, a brief one, you let yourself imagine what it would feel like to walk along the finished road with the same lightness the travellers carry. To feel the stones hold your weight without remembering the cost, to step without sinking into mud or stumbling over roots or carrying pieces of the landscape on your shoulders. The thought passes, it always does. Your shovel sinks into the soil, the rhythm resumes, the road waits, and somewhere behind you, faint and fading, the footsteps of travellers continue, light, unburdened, unaware of the weight they leave untouched. The travellers fade into the horizon, their footsteps swallowed by distance and the quiet certainty of a road built for people who will never think of you again. Their silhouettes disappear behind a bend of hills, leaving only the faint impression of movement in the air. You return to your work, not because anyone tells you to, but because momentum pulls you forward, the same way the Empire's straight lines do. Your shovel lifts and falls with the steady weight of repetition. Dust clings to your forearms again, settling in thin coats that soften the harshness of sun-worn skin. The morning grows warmer, light sharpening into the colour of brass pressed too long against stone. You notice them before you hear them. A small group approaches from the direction of the camp, figures dressed differently from workers, with tunics that hang too comfortably, sandals that have never tasted mud deeply enough to leave a mark. Their pace is measured but unburdened, as though the ground has already agreed to carry them without negotiation. Officials! Their shadows stretch long before their bodies arrive, falling across the unfinished stones in shapes too thin to be mistaken for labourers. They walk with the confidence of men who assume the world exists in the exact order they expect. You straighten slightly, not out of respect, but because instinct teaches you to stand a certain way when watched by those who write reports rather than roads. One of them holds a wax tablet, its surface blank except for the faint grooves of old notes scraped away and reused. Another carries a stylus. The rest carry nothing but certainty. They stop near your section of the road, their gaze sweeping over the stones, the soil, the edges you've spent the morning shaping. Their eyes do not pause on the people, only the work. The stones receive more attention than the hands that placed them. The ground earns more scrutiny than the backs that bent over it. You wipe your palms against your tunic, watching them from the corner of your vision. They speak quietly to each other, voices muffled by distance and indifference. One crouches to touch a section of compacted gravel, rubbing it between his fingers with the mild curiosity of someone examining a piece of fruit at a market stall. He nods to the man with the tablet. A line is scratched. Another official walks along the edge of the road, tapping the stones lightly with his sandal. He lifts his foot each time, as though expecting the ground to react. When it doesn't, he makes a soft sound, approval perhaps, though it carries no warmth. He doesn't look at you. He doesn't ask who worked here. Why would he? The road speaks. The worker doesn't. You stand still while they assess the next few meters, waiting for a signal that you may continue. The moment stretches longer than it needs to, but patience is a resource you've cultivated carefully. Eventually, one waves a hand, dismissively, almost lazily, as if brushing dust off a sleeve. The gesture says nothing and everything. Continue. You lift your tool, but the rhythm takes a moment to return. The interruption, brief as it is, sits in your body like a stone placed in the wrong spot. Your muscles remember the pause, even after you begin moving again. Behind you, the officials move on, drifting like shadows along the length of the road. They stop occasionally to confer, to carve another mark into the wax tablet, to gesture at angles and distances with hands that have never held a tamping board. Their silence carries weight, not respect, not interest, simply the kind that comes from knowing they do not need to speak to be heard. Your name is not requested, not recorded, not needed. The road is theirs. The labour does not require a signature. A breeze stirs, bringing a faint coolness that coats your skin before dissolving under the sun's steady heat. You breathe it in gratefully, though the relief lasts only seconds before dust finds your lungs again. Still, the breeze gives the moment a small softness, as if the air is apologising for everything else it asks you to endure. One of the officials leans close to a stretch of compacted stone, squinting as though searching for flaws invisible to anyone without a tablet. His fingers trace a faint line along the surface. He frowns, but only for a moment. And when he stands, the expression dissolves like chalk in water. The stylus scratches again. You cannot tell whether that's good or bad. It doesn't matter. Either way, the work continues. Your shoulders ache, not sharply, just consistently. a dull pressure that waits beneath the skin like a tenant refusing to leave. You roll your shoulders back, adjusting your stance so the ache spreads evenly rather than collecting in one inconvenient place. The shift helps, a little. The officials reach a portion where several workers labour side by side. They speak briefly to each other, never to the workers themselves, then step around a pile of stones with distaste, as though the stones had arranged themselves without permission. The stylus scratches again, approval or disapproval. The marks look the same from this distance. When they near the marshy section you shaped earlier, their expressions tighten slightly. One kneels and presses the wood of his sandal against the gravel layer, testing its resilience. His face reveals nothing. He stands, wipes his fingers against a clean fold of his tunic, and nods. The nod is directed at no one in particular. Their approval is quiet, but so is their dismissal. They step over the trenches, sidestep a plank, and continue walking as though the land had always intended to behave. Workers move aside instinctively, creating pathways for them without needing to be asked. The officials pass through these openings like water through reeds, leaving no sign they were ever there except the faint, fresh marks in the wax. By the time they reach the far end of the stretch, the sun has risen high enough to strip the landscape of its early morning softness. Their figures shrink with distance, but their presence lingers long after they disappear. The road feels different in their absence, not lighter, not heavier, just quieter, as if it too waits for judgment. You grip your tool again, grounding yourself in the weight of something familiar. The shovel's handle has moulded to your palm over countless days, its shape as known as your own shadow. You lift it, let the metal catch the sun, and return to the task that fills the hours. A few workers share brief glances, muted acknowledgements that the interruption has ended. No one speaks. The silence folds neatly back into the labour, filling the spaces the officials never occupied. Your body settles into movement once more. The sun leans harder. Dust rises. Stones shift, scrape, settle. The road grows longer, broader, more certain. With each stroke of your shovel, you contribute to something that will carry people whose names will one day matter more than yours. As you work, a small thought rests in the back of your mind. The officials will return again someday. Tablets ready, styluses sharpened, eyes just as indifferent. They will assess, approve, dismiss. And when they do, you will still be here. Hands curled around the same tools, back bent to the same stones, name forgotten with the same efficiency as the dust the wind scatters across your skin. You inhale the warm air slowly, letting it fill your lungs with everything the inspectors left behind. Silence, dust, expectation. Then you exhale and continue. The officials disappear down the finished stretch, their figures swallowed by distance and sunlight, leaving behind only the faint memory of wax marks and the quiet tension of being examined. The air settles again once they're gone, as if the landscape had been holding its breath and finally allows itself to exhale. You feel the shift in your shoulders before you recognize it in your mind, an easing, mild but noticeable, like loosening a strap worn all day. Your shovel rests against your leg for a moment while you adjust your grip, the wood warm from hours of handling. The silence spreads out again, returning to its natural shape. It's not peaceful, not really. More like a familiar blanket you've grown used to, even if it scratches. A breeze stirs the dust at your feet, lifting it into a slow dance that spirals upward before falling apart again. The sun leans slightly westward, making the shadows longer, taller, stretching them like thin reminders of time passing, whether you keep pace or not. You shift your stance, noticing how the road surface gleams faintly in the slanting light. Something draws your gaze upward, not curiosity exactly, but the pull of habit, the need to measure your progress against something larger than the next stone. You straighten and turn, letting your eyes follow the line you've shaped with tired hands and half-spent strength. The finished road extends behind you, clean and deliberate, cutting across the land with the kind of confidence only geometry can possess. It lies there, with an almost serene stillness, as if pleased with itself. The stones fit together neatly, their surfaces smoothed by the weight of travellers you barely noticed earlier. The line holds steady, calm in its certainty, a straight scar across the landscape. It looks complete enough to be proud of, if pride was something that had ever been invited to this work. The quiet beauty of it surprises you for half a heartbeat, not because it is beautiful in the way rivers or valleys are beautiful, but because it is finished. And finished things are rare in your world, rare and distant and always behind you. You allow yourself one slow exhale, watching the dust drift away with the breath. The road behind you stands firm, a record of hours already spent, already written into the ground with sweat and patience. It will hold long after your joints give out, long after the muscles that shaped it forget how to lift, long after you are nothing but another unmarked contributor to a path countless feet will trust without thinking. Then your gaze shifts forward. The line continues, but only as an idea, stretching across hills and grass and uneven earth, an invisible demand waiting to be carved into being. The ground ahead is untouched, undisturbed except for the surveyor's markers that stand at intervals like thin sentinels. They point toward the horizon with quiet authority, drawing a line where nothing yet exists. The land here looks softer, but you know that softness is deceptive. Grass hides stones, soil hides roots, marsh hides its intentions until your foot sinks deeper than expected. Everything ahead has its own shape, its own desire to remain exactly as it is, and yet Rome asks it to become straight, firm, obedient. The space between the road behind you and the one waiting ahead feels like a long inhalation. You stand in the middle of both realities, the past pressed into stone, the future buried beneath soil. Your fingers flex around the handle of your shovel. The wood has molded to your grip over countless days, but it still reminds you, every now and then, how heavy it can be. You shift your weight, feeling the familiar ache gather at the base of your spine. It's a dull ache, patient and persistent. It doesn't argue with you, it simply exists. The overseer walks past, glancing at the markers ahead, without speaking. His eyes follow the invisible line the Empire has drawn across the world, and for a moment you watch him watching it. His expression is unreadable, not harsh, not approving, just resigned. He gives a small nod in the direction of the untouched ground. You don't need the nod. You already knew where you were going. You lift your shovel and begin walking toward the markers. Each step carries you away from what is finished and deeper into what must be started. The grass brushes against your calves as you move, its light touch a brief kindness before the work shifts it aside. When you reach the next section, the earth looks smooth, in a way that feels almost arrogant. The soil lies undisturbed, unaware, or pretending to be unaware, of the transformation it's about to endure. You place your foot on it, feel the soft give beneath your sandal, and imagine the countless layers that will replace this moment. Gravel, sand, crushed stone, packed earth, sweat, hours. You press the shovel's edge into the ground. The blade breaks the surface with a soft resistance, slicing through roots and soil as if opening a sealed memory. The smell of fresh earth rises immediately, damp, raw, honest. It fills your lungs in a way dust never can. You inhale deeply, savouring the brief clarity. Then you lift the first heaping weight of soil and toss it aside. The road ahead begins in that single motion. The workers beside you fall into rhythm, each one marking the ground with their own sections of effort. The land changes slowly, almost reluctantly, as if trying to decide whether it will tolerate this intrusion. The shovels rise and fall in a silent pattern, a choreography shaped by repetition rather than skill. Your back bows slightly under the strain, but you ignore the discomfort. The ache will settle. It always does. Pain becomes background noise when the task in front of you is bigger than complaint. As the trench takes shape, you glance back once more, not out of regret, but out of acknowledgement. The finished road remains steady, catching the light as if absorbing the day's fading warmth. It stands silent, unbothered, already indifferent to the hands that made it. Then you turn forward again. The ground ahead remains vast, uneven, waiting, not impatiently, simply expectant. The Empire's will stretches across it like a shadow, silent but unmistakable. You feel its weight not as a burden, but as a constant pressure, the kind that doesn't shout but hums just loud enough to fill every moment. Your shovel breaks the earth again, and again, and again. Each motion feels like opening a door to a journey whose end you will never see. Each foot of progress feels like a quiet argument with the land itself. Each breath feels older, shaped by hours of labour that have no desire to slow. The road behind is finished, the road ahead is infinite, and you stand between them, shaping the world inch by inch, knowing that your part will never be complete, knowing that the Empire's voice is not loud but always heard, knowing that your hands will always find more ground waiting to be remade. You lift another mound of soil, the road stretches forward, and the day continues, as it always does. Quietly, insisting, you keep moving. The soil lifts easily at first, each shovelful landing with a muted thump beside the growing trench. But the light begins to thin, slipping away from the surface of the world, one quiet inch at a time. Shadows stretch longer across the ground, merging with the darkening earth until you can no longer tell where one ends and the other begins. You feel the shift in the air before you even glance at the horizon, the day releasing its hold reluctantly, like a hand finally unclenching. Your arms ache with the same steady heaviness that has followed you through every hour, but the slowing of the sun gives the ache a different shape. It grows softer, heavier, less insistent. You push the shovel into the soil again, but the blade sinks deeper into dimness than into resistance. The sound of metal meeting earth grows muted, as if the ground is preparing itself for the night too. Someone nearby sets down a tool with a soft clatter. Another worker straightens, stretching stiff muscles that crackle faintly. You hear a low murmur rise and fall between a couple of men. Nothing distinct, nothing that demands a reply. Just the sound of people aware that daylight is slipping away, and with it, the Empire's attention. The overseer's whistle cuts briefly through the dusk. Not sharp, not urgent, simply a note that acknowledges the limits of vision. You rest your shovel's handle against your shoulder, letting its familiar weight settle there. The road ahead lies in half shadow now, its unfinished sections blending into the landscape, as though the land is not yet ready to admit its transformation. Your boots sink slightly as you step back from the trench, the softened earth yielding in a way that mirrors your own body. Dust clings to your skin in dull patches, turning your arms the same colour as the stones you carry. The air cools, slipping beneath the sweat still drying on your neck. You take a slow breath, feeling it travel deeper than usual, as if the night itself is helping push it along. The workers drift away from the line with the unspoken agreement of people whose routines have become muscle deep. You follow, your steps steady but slow. The day's labour pulling at your joints like invisible anchors. The tools remain for now, leaned against carts, lying in the grass, half buried in piles of displaced soil. They look almost peaceful in the fading light, as if even they are grateful for the pause. The landscape opens as you walk, revealing the road behind you in its long, patient stillness. The stones reflect the last traces of sunlight in faint glimmers, each one catching the day's dying glow before surrendering to the dusk. You watch those glimmers flicker, and for a moment the road looks almost alive, like something breathing, something remembering the hands that shaped it even if they never expect gratitude. The half-finished stretch ahead fades into a darker curve where the hills soften into shadow. Beyond that, the land falls entirely into night, unmarked, uncarved, waiting for the next day's insistence. It is a patience the Empire does not share, but the land holds on to it anyway. The scent of cooling earth rises around you, rich, deep, grounded in its refusal to stay transformed for long. You breathe it in, letting its damp weight settle in your lungs. It feels different from the dust, softer, less intrusive, as though the night is offering a small exchange. Give up the day, and in return, breathe something clean. Camp is close enough that the scent of smoke reaches you before the fire itself is visible. A few flames flicker to life, casting warm orange halos over the gathering figures. Someone stirs a pot, someone else arranges blankets beside a tent. The familiarity of it all folds around you like a worn cloak. You lower yourself onto the ground beside the half-finished path, choosing a patch of earth that still holds a trace of warmth from the day. It fades quickly beneath your spine, replaced by the cool firmness of soil settling through your clothes. The sensation is grounding, like lying against the pulse of something older than Rome, older than roads, older than the ambition that carved them. Your eyes drift upward. The sky deepens into a blue so dark it almost becomes black. One star appears, sharp and solitary, then another beside it, then a scatter of them across the dome above. They take their places without ceremony, each one confident enough not to compete with the others. They shine with a calm that doesn't change, whether a road is built or abandoned. You let your breath fall into a slower rhythm, syncing with the rise and fall of the night breeze. It carries faint hints of distant water, crushed grass, the smoke of campfires, and something impossible to name, something like stillness. Your body relaxes in sections. First your shoulders, then your back, then the muscles of your legs, one at a time. The ache doesn't disappear, it just rearranges itself into something bearable, something that will sleep if you allow it. Your gaze shifts to the road again, the part that glows faintly, the part that fades into the dark, the part that has yet to exist. You know, without needing to think it, that it will outlive you. It will hold the footsteps of strangers, the weight of carts, the dust of armies, the sandals of travellers who will never consider what lies beneath them. They will walk easily because your hands did not. The thought does not sting. It simply settles into your chest like another layer of stone, firm, unavoidable, part of the construction. You close your eyes for a moment, listening to the night gather around you. The wind moves across the half-built trench with a soft whisper, brushing against the edges like a quiet inspection of its own. Grass rustles beside your arm. A distant owl calls once, twice, as if acknowledging the presence of workers lying still on their backs. Your breath warms the air in small clouds that fade quickly. Each exhale carries a trace of dust collected across the day, drifting upward to become part of the night's quiet. The road beside you does not move, it does not change, it simply exists. Patient, durable, indifferent in the way only built things can be. It needs nothing from you now. Not until morning. The stars sharpen overhead, gathering into constellations that mean something to people far more learned than you. You watch them anyway, letting their distant light wash across your thoughts. They do not care whether you finish the road or not. They do not care how much of yourself you pour into the ground. They shine because shining is what they do, not for Rome, not for empires, not for labourers. Your eyelids grow heavy. The ground cools further beneath your spine, holding your weight with the steady patience of something that has supported countless bodies before yours. You shift slightly, finding a position that eases the pressure in your hips. The night settles deeper around you, folding its silence into every space the day left empty. A final breath fills your lungs, cool, clean, unhurried. You let it go. The road waits beside you, unfinished and unconcerned, stretching toward a horizon you will never reach. It will remain long after your footsteps fade, long after the tools rust, long after the empire forgets the hands that shaped its spine. You rest, knowing the night holds the road now, and for a little while, that is enough. And that brings us to the end of tonight's story. Feel free to like, subscribe, or leave a comment with another forgotten corner of history you'd like explored next. If you'd like early access to more of these quiet descents into forgotten history, ad-free audio of the episodes, or just want to support the show, there's a link to the Patreon in the description. If you're listening on a podcast app, a rating or review helps more people find their way to these stories. And special thanks to the supporters who make this show possible, including our chroniclers, Andrew S., Rich Davis, and Leslie Schofield. Sleep well.